I'm so quite curious to know about.
Sure.
So these are the so-called mental issues that people face. Okay, how would you approach it from an Islamic perspective?
Islamic perspective. Okay, so usually the first session I will brief them whether they want Western therapy or Islamic therapy.
Okay.
If they want Islamic therapy, then I ask what's their level of religiosity. Okay, whether do they pray their 5 daily prayers?
Okay.
Do they hold on to certain belief like what do you see our Prophet as?
Okay.
What do you see the Quran as?
Okay.
And then the third one would be do you have any litany? Is it like we read for our
Okay.
for the Arabs,
Okay.
yeah. So if they fulfill all three, then it makes the work much more easier.
Okay. It means if you somehow ascertain that they are quite religiously inclined and they are practicing Muslims who also do wirid and all that, then the task becomes a bit easier.
Correct.
The solution becomes closer in that sense. Okay.
Because believe it or not, I do have a client who take all the three criteria. I just ask her one question, which is how much, like, ever since you started reading the wirid and putting your trust in God, how different have you felt in your life dealing with your anxiety?
Okay.
That was the only question. And it was then after that she cried. She broke down. She broke down. Then after that, terus dia macam, okay, now I understand already. So that was like 2 sessions only. So the first session I got to know her, tick, and okay dah. The second session, I get to know what she reads and all, like Radio Latif and all. So I asked that the question, straight away she broke down, then dah. Straight away she recovered.
She found the answers really
Correct.
lah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So again, although yes, some people say that kalau ada mental health problem means jauh dengan Allah, your relationship with God is not strong. That is different. It's a different scenario. That is how do I say? It's not true to a very how do I say? It's not true at all lah. The hikmah behind why Allah sent down prophets to be human is so that we are able to learn from their stories. Yeah, the only difference is they are maksum. They don't do sins.
They don't do sins.
Yeah, but them being humans mean they have feelings. They go through sadness, fear, anger, so on and so forth. So if we relate back to how do I say?
But this is also in the Quran lah.
Correct.
Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam also said, right?
Yes.
I complain to Allah. Like Basti wa huzni ila Allah, right? So it's like my grief and complaint to Allah. So he felt it, but the way what we can learn from here is that he sought Allah's help.
Correct.
So it's not that he lacks belief.
Yes.
And he experienced the feelings because he lacks belief. He acknowledges that there's this grief and sadness in him, but he complains about it to Allah. I think I think.
But then I think anxiety is a marad kan? It's a sickness kan? You cannot attribute anxiety to the Prophet kan? Because the Prophet kan is like perfect. Macam sadness and griefness, okay. Tapi this is what like some scholars say lah.
That's why you must define what's anxiety lah.
That's why tadi
because I think okay, so let's be clear. So first of all, prophets are humans.
Yeah.
They experience feelings, but they are not diagnosed with
sickness,
illnesses that would remove their standing as a prophet.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so when Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam says that he feels sad and grief, we cannot link. Can we say that's anxiety? I don't think so.
It's not anxiety.
What is the definition of anxiety actually?
Okay, definition of anxiety.
This study you said is a OCD, PTSD, then macam ada cold sweat, apa semua kan. That is a state of
symptoms.
Symptom.
Yeah, symptom.
But macam kira that is a state of sickness lah kan.
Okay,
so macam I don't think we can link it to
This is not
prophet
easy. This is not an easy thing to discuss.
So, for example, first of anxiety itself is very wide. Again, so from the Islamic perspective, I follow what is because I deal with both, right? So from Western perspective, there's anxiety, that DSM-5 manual, the people going through symptoms, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Whereas for Islamic psychology, I follow Imam Al-Ghazali one, which is the idea of waswas, khawatir. Yeah, so khawatir itself, is the how do I say, is the how to say, the anxious thoughts that human have. Yeah, and in fact, it's not so-called a sickness. It's just it's just a part of human being. Yeah, so that's why how do I say this?
So it's a momentary feeling of fear, is it?
Correct.
But if it's a momentary feeling of fear, then Nabi Musa AS also experienced it.
Yalah,
Kifata Musa.
Yeah. Kira kalau fear is okay lah. But kalau anxiety, kalau if you link it to like depression,
that one no lah.
kira it's a sickness. If you categorize it as a sickness, then
that's why the Prophet went
because
through.
I've heard this someone they link the Prophet to the depression. So like one of a learned scholar actually tegur lah. Because like you say just now, the Prophet is ma'asum.
Yeah, I think you cannot say the Prophet was depressed.
Yeah, no.
I don't think anyone should say that actually.
So anxiety is just fear. It's not a sickness.
In the Islamic perspective.
Oh.
No, okay.
Yeah, there was only one reason why Allah SWT brought down what Surah Duha was because the Prophet was getting a bit more anxious. Why am I not getting any revelations?
Yeah. Sedih. Kira sedih is a normal human being punya feelings kan.
Yeah, that's why we need to include other forms of symptom to then diagnose a person with anxiety or depression.
Okay. But I think that is where the problem lies. Because I think it is a question of distinguishing between these various forms. Like what is the difference? What is the specific difference between fear and anxiety? Because we can say the Prophet felt fear,
and sadness and grief.
But were they diagnosed with anxiety? I don't think we can say that. And I think this is why maybe the mosques are reluctant.
Oh,
Makes sense.
Right? Because maybe the definition isn't particularly clear as it should be to them, and that's why they don't see it as a problem that the mosque has to address. Pasal they might think that no lah, ni semua kau baca Quran lah, okay. Right? I mean, because and then at the other extreme, there are proponents who said no, the Prophet also had depression. Right? So we have to.
So we need to find a balance lah between these two, I think.
So maybe it's a question of clarity lah. You know, you need some definitional clarity in terms of what are the distinctions between these kind of symptoms and what the prophets felt and what the prophets what we cannot say about the prophets in terms of the diagnosis. But do you talk about this to your clients?
Yes, if they prefer Islamic psychology. So I will pick out certain stories from the prophets or even the companions themselves, so that they can relate that if I have someone, I know of a person that went through it. So how, and usually we learn from how did they go through it. So let's say, how do I say this? Okay, let's say the loss of a dear one, let's say their own child. Yeah, so even the Prophet went through that. Yeah. Right?
Nangis sampai buta kan?
Yeah. So that is for Nabi Yaqub. Yes, or even the Prophet Muhammad SAW, when he lost his son Ibrahim, he cried also. Yeah. So but how did he
bounce back?
Prophet Yaqub and Nabi Ibrahim went through that process of grief. Yeah.
Nabi Ibrahim,
Nabi Yaqub. And
Nabi Rasulullah
and the loss of Ibrahim. How did they go through that process of grief is the one that we need to learn from.
Okay.
So as we relate to this, I would say, okay, so it's my own perspective, these spiritual figures, because they are prophet after all, and they have no sins. Once they are able to relate to these spiritual figures, then for every time that difficulty comes across to them, then they are reminded of the Prophet, which in turn remind them of Allah. So always putting Allah first. Regardless of how they are reminded of Allah, at least these things lead them to, okay, I know that Allah is with me, I know that Allah is fair, Allah is merciful, I know that there must be a wisdom behind why Allah put me through this. But the moment from the Islamic psychology perspective, would be the moment I put Allah first and I do my part on what as a human being I can do, and I leave everything, then Allah will ease my my journey. Even if it doesn't, that at least I know that this journey that I go through or have gone through will be rewarded in the hereafter. Yeah. So it's a mix of, it's a balance of both lah.
Was it hard to include this prophetic guidance or like prophetic stories from the Quran, kan, when you cite these stories to people who are stressed out? Like are they receptive towards it, or would they macam be like, oh itu Nabi, ni kita, mana relevant, you know, macam is it hard to include prophets in?
I think it depends on the clients themselves. If they are open to it, then usually they won't they will be open to it. Yeah, if they're open to it, then they will be very accepting. You know, like, oh, okay, is it? You know, sometimes they learn from this kind of stories. Or I do have Muslim clients yang ask for Western therapy.
Western therapy.
Yeah,
Western therapy.
Yeah, so when they come for session,
So
I
they
ask
don't
them,
want to.
they don't want any Islamic essence to it.
Oh, so they want to just completely disassociate their symptoms from Islam.
Yeah, correct.
What would you say to such clients?
I will just follow them.
Yeah,
I will just
cater
guide
to them.
lah. Yeah, cater to them. Yeah,
But you won't
just-
try to macam preach.
Yes, of course I will try. That's tempting kan? Because you are so used to that, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I just ask them, what do you think of the story of this one? Because the moment we ask them in a way that makes them think, they won't be bothered by the fact that it's Islamic. They will just be bothered by, oh, is it, you know, okay, what can I learn from that?
Okay.
I see.
So from another extreme end, I do have clients yang for many years they have been doing so much amalan,
Okay.
and the moment something strikes them and they disbelieve in Allah. So
Oh, okay.
so like when I do have this client who for many years he has been praying the mosque Jamaah, Isya, Subuh, and then certain amalan like reading and hafal certain surah from the Quran.
Okay.
But the moment he was tested with a physical disability,
Okay.
he disbelieved in Allah. You know, he was questioning why Allah puts me in this situation. I've been so kind to him. So when he came to me, initially he didn't want any Islamic therapy because he doesn't want to be reminded of Allah.
I see.
Because
Yeah.
it hurts him.
Correct. Then slowly after 4 sessions, I asked him, you know, like what do you think? Or how do you think the amalan that you have done in the past is benefiting you through this, you know, through this journey of you having to struggle with this? Then he just said lah, maybe it could have been worse. Yeah. So to a certain extent, my amalan, Allah replace it with, let's say I'm supposed to get a full-blown how do I say?
Stage 4.
Paralysis.
Stage 4. Yeah. So the amalan kirakan cover for that stage 3 and 4. I only get stage 2.
I see.
Yeah.
Yalah. So macam instead of losing both hands, you only lose one hand, something like that.
Something like that. Yes. So because of that, slowly macam make him reflect on his own lah. Yeah. So usually, honestly, I do love it when clients start to or are able to reflect and contemplate on their own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because as they explore themselves on their own, they get answers on their own also. Yeah, so that will serve as a push or a motivation for them that, yeah, I can do it. So this in turn kick off or kick away any negative belief of themselves that, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm useless. Yeah.
And that is central. So coming to the solution on your own, of course you guide them towards the process of discovering the solution, but it is not the same as telling them what the solution is and then ask them to do it. So it's and that's how you try to get them to think about the religion and all that lah. So Islamic psychology comes in that sense. That's quite a so you got a lot of all these stories we want to hear more about this. I think
Yeah, but of course I think just to put it out there, I think my experience is still limited lah. I'm sure there are other you know, like Islamic counselors, you know, like we can learn from their stories. Yeah, so again,
but in a few years that you've come across all these stories that I think are quite eye-opening and rather insightful in that sense. So I think in summary, I think there is room for Islamic counselling services, especially those that do not completely go the Islamic route, nor completely go the secular route, but in a sense somewhere in between, and not fixated on where in between, but dependent on things like how much Islam they want inside the counselling and the level of piety and all that lah. And I think it's not something that, again, we completely reject the Western approach, nor do we completely accept it, because there are solutions in Islam that can provide help for such this. There's also guidance from the Quran and also the stories of the prophets about such things. And I think it would be good lah if more Islamic institutions, mosques, organizations, you know, they look at this as a possible support to the community, and I think that's what it needs, like, inshallah. Okay, thanks so much for your.
Any like how do we contact you if any of our followers or listeners wants to engage your services?
Okay, you can just drop me a DM at MH Therapy SG.
MH Therapy SG. Okay.
Tak ada WhatsApp number.
WhatsApp number. You only get the WhatsApp number after you drop me the message.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just DM lah, MH Therapy, and then
MH Therapy SG. So either DM or email. Yeah. The reason why I only give contact numbers after they have dropped me a DM because for the past few years I've gotten calls from people that I don't know.
Okay.
They are not my client.
Oh.
Of course, I do help them lah. One very how do I say this? Memorable incident was it was Hari Raya.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Hari Raya. I was having some family punya gathering.
Okay.
Ada orang nak jam the building.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah, really. So she
Okay.
called me.
Macam tahu je.
I was just guessing.
Literally. So I had to ground her. I think I had to talk to her for 2.5 hours. Just
During
to
Hari
ensure that
Raya.
she's safe. Yeah. But of course, usually, even after they decide to come in for therapy, I will tell them. I will put some certain rules, house rules. Yeah, I will put my number. I will tell them that my number is the last number that you should call in the situation where you feel suicidal. Yeah.
Okay. I see.
Okay, so
Like in that case, just if anyone is
DM.
interested in the services, ideal services as MH counselling or MH therapy, sorry,
Yeah,
you can DM him. You can contact him through Instagram. Is it?
Inshallah.
Instagram, inshallah.
Okay.
And if there are any mosques or any religious organisations who see the
Want to
value in such
collaborate,
counselling as much as we have seen, I think it would be great lah if you contact him. Okay. I think I want to discuss a lot more with him personally. banyak sih OCD, anxiety, pasal even
PTSD.
Yeah, nah, off screen lah.
Dah lah, insyaAllah.
Off screen.
Or in our subsequent episodes lah. Okay.
Okay,
Assalamualaikum.
bye.
Bye-bye.